Yeah, come on in. Hop on for a second. I'll talk to you for a minute, CTV. How you been?
What is up, baby? And how you been, brother?
I've been doing pretty good. You know, we got that fucking long COVID. That was fun.
Mm.
We got sick with COVID during Christmas and then like caught it again basically for like New Year's and I was fucking like knocked down, dude. Couldn't stream for a couple weeks.
Jeez. Well, that sucks,
Yeah.
man. I think I must have got some kind of something a couple of weeks ago. Fucking gave me like the chills, the damn night sweats. I mean, it's pretty bad. So yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, well,
Glad to hear you're on the mend though.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good. Coming back to Twitch, trying to gain that crowd back. Been putting in work, trying to fight the good fight, man. And I don't blame you for leaving this toxic ass space, man. I do not fucking blame you.
Well, look, man. For me, it just became obvious that there were a lot of people that were a little disillusioned about how the community actually ran, and when I stepped aside and said, "Well, I'm just not going to worry about any of it, and I'm done," we see what happened. So, who was right?
I mean, to a certain extent, you were right. I think, I think there was a certainly a conservative, a small group of people. You know what I mean? Like not a ton of big streamers or anything, but there was, once you left the void, I mean, it took a lot of the conservative kind of like community away. Lecture fans come back a little bit. But it's really just lecture fan, me and Rob Knorr, and I'm not a fucking conservative, not really.
No, you're not. You think that that the police shouldn't be working for the people. You think they should be working for corporations, which is crazy. But
I think they should work for the people, not work for the state. But
but the state is the people.
Did COVID teach you nothing, sir?
Oh, COVID taught me a lot about how there's a bunch of dumbasses that are so willing to give over their freedoms to the fucking government. They're fucking stupid, right? But it doesn't. Like all of this
branch,
stuff is more
I'll take that.
Go ahead.
I said olive branch. I'll take that.
Oh,
a lot of dumb people willing to give up their freedom. That's true.
That's absolutely true. I mean, how many fucking people were we sitting there arguing with during that whole time talking about, if you want to voluntarily do something, that's great. But if you're going to try to mandate it by force, you can kiss my ass. So
yeah.
And the hell, they're still running around. As a matter of fact, you might as well just call them Chinese simps at this point because they're the only ones still wanting lockdowns.
China. Well, the narrative is finally breaking a little bit, and it's kind of funny that people think that the narrative is breaking as like a victory. My favorite thing that's going on right now is like, doctors and all these people being like, well, we're actually overcounting COVID deaths and it's a problem. It's like, dog, you've been doing that since the very beginning. Like, here's the CDC data. What are you talking about? And it's like, oh, now that you're trying to sell vaccine efficacy, you realize that like overcounting COVID deaths makes it seem like the vaccine's not effective because it isn't. And like you want to downplay that and like you want to give like props to Biden.
Oh, that's the other thing too. Not only were there so many dumbass people willing to give away their freedoms, right? They were also willing to allow corporations to inject their body with frankly untested materials. And then not only volunteer for the shit, but then attempt to shame others that were not as delusional as them. What the fuck?
Yeah,
that's that's the complete back end of where we're at. So anybody that was out there arguing for any of that shit, don't even bother talking to CTV because you are not capable of having an intelligent conversation. Okay, it's just that. It's just that simple.
I go a step further, right, and would say that the government never has the right to mandate any of those things ever. Period. And that's the problem, is that when you give them when you justify the norm, the moral norm, that the state has the right to, mandate its citizens be quarantined, or that its citizens, take certain medical procedures, or that businesses close, but like you have to have enough evidence, right? Well, then you give them that wiggle room to bullshit all the fucking evidence, because you established the norm.
You still need to have, the state. The state needs to have the ability to, okay, because the state is the people in this example of representative government. That said, okay, what we found out is that there are so many people that are just completely unaware of government, its use, function, form, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we now have to suffer through the back end of the dumbass decision that was made, and hopefully these dumbass people learn you can't do that dumb shit, and you definitely can't throw all of your trust into the government and the corporations that are trying to sell you a fucking vaccine.
Well, I mean, the government and the corporations are kind of one and the same.
You say that, but then it's I see why you would say that, but you have to also remember at the same time there are lots of other examples where government gets pitted against a corporation against the government. And in most cases, that's going to be the norm. Because OSHA, any labor laws, etc.
Okay.
So
you think OSHA is pitting against what the corporations actually want?
I'm saying that OSHA has laws and regulations in place in order to try to keep corporations in check, which is the whole point.
Presumably, right? But then we could look at like things like, OSHA going overboard in asbestos removal in the 90s, and how, the large corporations actually lobbied OSHA for these incredibly stringent regulations that were placed upon them, because they knew it would destroy their competition, because small business owners and small construction companies couldn't afford to take that hit, and large corporations could, and then they eventually were able to pass down those things on, onto the consumer, thus rising home costs, rising, new construction. Right. And it's like, and it benefited the large corporations. Like the two are married together. Like, sure, sometimes sometimes they try and check each other,
it's more, you have to remember, right? I get what you're saying, but what you're saying is in fact the exception to the rule. Like, we understand there's always an inherent amount of corruption that's going to be there, but that is not the biggest majority, right? It's not plus 50% plus, right? It could go as high as say 40%, maybe even 45, maybe it does at some point, right? But if you go over that point, you're not in a representative government at all. You're in a complete dictatorship whenever that happens. So here, that's why I say,
I think definitionally, the Biden administration without a doubt proved that we're in a dictatorship. Like, you cannot call this a representative democracy. The moment that Biden used OSHA, right? Funnily enough, the moment that he used OSHA to circumnavigate the Supreme Court, to attempt to force mandates on eviction, not use the CDC, to force eviction moratoriums, despite being ruled unconstitutional, and simply just circumnavigated the Supreme Court, I think at that point we were definitionally in a dictatorship, and that the Constitution was completely thrown out of the window to such a degree that it destroyed the power irrevocably destroyed the power of one of the three branches of government. Now, of course, there's some semblance that it still exists, but I think that is probably a tipping point of a point of no return for us.
I wouldn't say that it's not a point of no return, because the reality is that Article 5 allows for the states themselves to call a convention. It doesn't necessarily have to have Congress involved. You see what I'm saying? So it's not a point of no return, but damn it, you're going to have a lot of working together in order to be able to, and that right there is like, I think
that's why
we're
friends, right there.
Yeah, I think
because like you want to limit the state, right? Because you think it's gone too far. I want to limit the state because I think it's unjustified, and for the time being, we're fellow travelers. And then you have the other anarchists, like the lefty anarchists, that are like, I want to limit the state. How do you do that? By socialism. And you're like, fucking, that doesn't track. That's not how that works.
No, it doesn't at all. So that's why I say that we are still at a point that we can work together. And the climate of at least social media for me in the last 6 months that I've been looking at it without the noise of Twitch, right?
Right, stepping away.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the precipice of, like, the woke movement is definitely on the decline. And I wouldn't say conservatism is on the rise, but I would say that conservatism is being much more widely viewed and accepted. So with that said, at least we end up in a conversation that includes libertarians.
I think we're at a tipping point. Which direction it goes, I think, is something that is like really, really difficult to tell, because I think, you look at Generation Z, right? Like, Generation Z is not voting Republican, and like they're not following a trajectory that every other generation since the Greatest Generation has followed, right? Which is this aging out of being very left wing. And millennials are in the same category. Millennials are becoming more conservative as they get older, but nowhere near the same rates that Gen X and the boomers and the previous generations. And
well, you got to remember too, millennials went through this bucket. I mean, like, that was kind of the start of this bullshit education system that we had.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, they really started getting into the curriculum. Like, when I left high school, I didn't know. There's a lot of stuff leaving high school that you should probably know that they just don't even bother covering. Like being an entrepreneur, as an example. I mean, the whole fucking country's built and based around capitalism. You'd think that they'd teach you how to be a fucking entrepreneur, start a business, but no. They teach you how to be a consumer.
I wouldn't necessarily call we have capitalism, but it's capitalistic.
Well,
capitalism would require a free market economy, which we're very far from.
Well, the reason for that is because capitalism itself was allowed to take on capital from the future into the present by way of debt. So because it was allowed to do that, it changes the whole dynamic of capitalism itself, because now it's not based upon the actual productivity of the people. Now it's based on the amount of money that you were able to bring from the future into the present, make it debt, and then try to have it work for you. And then if you fail, then that future is now just wasted. So look how much waste of the future money that is here. $31 trillion. You see what I'm saying?
Careful. You're starting to sound like a libertarian there for a second.
Woo! It's reality. All of it's a fucking Ponzi scheme ever since they passed the Federal Reserve Banking Act. All these fucking criminals running around stealing all of our money, and then they sold fucking globalization, right? As the net. No, that was fucking stupid, right? Because
that's what I meant when it's like we're at a tipping point, but I don't know which way we go, because ESG, for example, Vanguard recently pulled out of net zero initiatives, right? So it's like, is ESG failing, or is BlackRock going to maintain it? Like we'll see kind of situation, because what I mean. Like look at like the World Economic Forum, right? Like here's some of your politicians that are bought and paid for, and you should never trust. Dan Crenshaw, right? World Economic Forum, selected him to penetrate the cabinet to push forward, the globalist agenda. Pete Buttigieg, Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, Ivanka Trump, Senator Tom Cotton, Tulsi Gabbard, right? Like, these people are your enemies, and should forever be shamed out of the existence of ever being in the government. And yet there they are, right? And so it's like, does the woke movement dying? Is it really dying, or is it being absolved into this like kind of Marcusian, large state control? It's like, oh, we're waking up to critical race theory in schools, but it's like, are we? Because the UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030 is pushing that shit. Portrait of a Graduate, conservatives are, voting for that left and right. Social emotional learning's in a third of all elementary schools. So we'll see.
Well,
We'll see.
until you get millennials to a point to where they understand the government the same way that you and I do, understand the Constitution, understand what the framers were even fucking talking about when they were talking about how a central bank shouldn't be created, right?
Right.
Until you get to that point, which is a lot of information, it really is, and it takes time and meditation and study. It's not like you could pick it up in an evening and go, "Oh yeah, I got all this shit."
Yeah, no, I mean it takes a lot of, and that's part of what I'm trying
And
to do here.
yeah, and that right there is what should have been taught in school, but it just wasn't. They taught you how to be a consumer, how to be able to earn just enough money, how to be able to pay your taxes, but not worry about, being an entrepreneur and actually being able to, because like like when Trump said that the system is rigged, right? And then they pan the camera over to Obama and Hillary and they're like, "Oh no, it's not. No, it's not."
That was probably one of the greatest Trump moments that ever existed, was because Hillary Clinton tried to call him out for not paying taxes, and he was like, "Yeah, the system's rigged for people like me, and I know it's rigged because I've used it." And
right.
Hillary Clinton and Obama and all the people, they don't want to change it because them and their friends use it too, and it was just like, it was certainly a base take by.
So I did a lot of time thinking about like what is the easiest way to try to explain that idea to people. The system's rigged. So how do you explain that to normal everyday Americans to get them to be able to understand how to do it? Explain it to them like this: 1099 income, W2 income, 1099 income. If you've got W2 income right now, well, that's good. That's something solid, right? You're working for somebody else though. 1099 income allows you to be able to write all of it off. So if you can get yourself to be an entrepreneur and start a business, even if it's, selling t-shirts or fucking planting potatoes, whatever it is, if you earn it 1099 income, you can write that off as business expenses at the end of the year. So you just need to get in the tax code to see what's write-offable. But
assuming
1099 income
you make
allows
enough
you
money
to do that.
to do so.
That's the whole point, is that getting into earning 1099
enough. You got to be rich enough to fucking write it off on your taxes.
You have to start earning it first. You have to get the 1099 to where you can write it off. That way that the government doesn't get their share. That's exactly what Trump was talking about. 1099 income versus W2 income.
I think we disagree, but I mean, I appreciate the disagreement. I think you start telling people that the system is rigged and that, the wealthy elite control these things, and that and you don't ground that in philosophical principles, but instead you ground it in a document like the Constitution that the government has wiped its ass with 100 times over. Like, I think what you're going to end up with is left-wing populism. I think they're gonna turn against the conservative guard.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I think we've already seen examples of that from history just in this last century, right? So
yeah, people get excited for guillotines when they don't understand what's going on and they realize that the elites are fucking them over.
Well, and that's why that's the thing I've been trying to do, is figure out the easy way to explain it. From where I'm sitting in life, the easiest way for me to understand is 1099 income versus W2. Because if you can get more 1099 income and you can write that off and the government doesn't get it, so then you have that, and then you can build the next year again, and then the next year again. 1099 income, you keep building. But if you can say, like, you got your operation up off the ground and you're doing pretty decent, if you can say afford to somehow get more capital to be able to put in it, you might see an exponential growth because of that, because it takes money to make money, and that's where the system is definitely rigged. And I can understand all of the left-wing arguments whenever they talk about, wealthy people got the money, they can make more money, this and that and the other. That makes complete sense. So it takes capital to make capital, but if you don't know where to start, you'll never even get started. So that's why I'm like, 1099 income, learn to write that shit off, and then keep building your 1099 income until you don't have to rely on the W2 income, and then you just keep building. That's how you become the entrepreneur.
Maybe. Maybe, I mean, that's probably a good, certainly a good path for many.
Yeah.
You know, and if you begin to understand money, you begin to understand the system a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. So I never had anybody
Amen.
explain it to me that way. And once I started thinking about it, I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. You know, if you're driving an independent contractor as a truck driver, same thing. If you can write it off, you get to keep it. So if you get to keep it, then the government doesn't get to
make. And that's another thing too. Like that was something that I learned from truck drivers, right? Was just how, you know, how much more value there is in going into business for yourself. Was, you know, that was all, like, so many truck drivers that I had spoken to, because my neighbor growing up was a truck driver, but his wife started her own business, basically finding routes for truck drivers on their return home, right? Like that was her business, was, you know, hooking them up to like pick up a load in whatever city they were in, so that like was, you know, nearby the area, and like coordinating all of that stuff, because she started doing it for her husband.
Just started being a broker.
Right. And that was one of the things I learned, was that, like, you know, working for a business where they own your truck, right, was such a drastic amount, like lower amount of money than like when you own your own truck and you can, you know, coordinate your own loads, and like you can make smart decisions about like whether or not, you know, it's worth it to go to a certain area during certain inclement weather, or whether or not you want to go. And like, you know what I mean? Like you can just, when you're more in control of like your money and what you're doing, that they made double, triple sometimes what like truck drivers working for like, you know, Peterbilt or, you know, some big company were making. And, and it was like, wow, you know, and that was kind of a wake up call for me in that regard. Was actually truck drivers. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the other thing too. Is like truck drivers tend to be more of your not educated people, you know, so then they don't even know how to use the system itself to be able to maintain, you know, their capital, and they just end up spending it all in taxes or whatever the case is. I mean, it's bad enough, you know, you got to keep up the truck, you got to pay for fuel, there's a whole lot of expense that goes into it, and then you got the government wanting their fucking share of the pie too, and it's like, fuck you, man. You didn't do a damn bit of work for any of this fucking money, and you want half of it? Kiss my ass.
All right, now you've gone from sounding like a libertarian to sounding like a goddamn commie. All right? That fucking capitalist has sacrificed so much to be able to own those vehicles.
We're not talking about the W-2 driver that's working for someone else that owns the truck. I was just talking about, you know, the independent contractor that owns his own vehicle, and then the government wants to come take their shit. It's like, no, fuck you, buddy, right? You didn't turn one fucking nut on this bitch. You didn't pump fuel into this one fucking time. You know, you barely kept the fucking roads level enough for me to be able to drive on, right? And I pay taxes from the fucking fuel to be able to fix that, and you still ain't fixing the roads. Kiss my ass.
But without taxes, who will fix the roads, CTV?
It's true. It's true. How many taxes do they need? See, that's the question.
0. They need 0 taxes.
Well, you got to have some. Got to have some tax.
None. There's nothing that the market can't do better than the state.
You still got to have tax money coming in to be able to pay for the corporation to build it if you're going to hire the work out. How you planning on paying for it?
The corporation will build it because the road will be valuable.
Oh, so the corporation is going to own the road?
Yes.
Oh, so then the corporation can close the road anytime they want. It's not free access.
Yes.
All right, so you're an idiot.
Why? Why am I an idiot? Explain to me why I'm an idiot.
Because you're trusting the corporation with your ability to be able to get home.
Okay. Why does that make me an idiot?
Because you could be on the other side of the fucking road and the corporation says you can't go home.
You mean like the government did during the lockdowns? I'm sorry. They only let me stay in my home.
So the difference there with the government is, at least, as small of a margin as it is, at least you have a reprieve, right? By way of a vote. You don't have anything with the corporation, and they will tell you to fuck off, and the only thing they give a damn about is their bottom line, and they don't give a damn who they hurt. And that is reality.
So what is the incentive of the corporation to randomly shut down their roads?
Money.
How? How does that make them money?
Why, you're asking me a question that I'm obviously going to have to include a whole bunch of other details, right? So let me
Yeah.
explain. It wouldn't take
We said I'm
anything
an
for
idiot,
us,
so explain it to me like I'm an idiot.
right? So it wouldn't take but just to, say the corporation decided to shut the road down for 2 or 3 days. Maybe they were trying to build
Mhm.
another road, and the county was giving them grief. Maybe somebody didn't want to sell the land or something, so they're like, well, you know what? We're just going to shut down the fucking road till you give us
Okay.
what we want. And then as soon as they get what they want, then they're going to go back to making money. But they were able to make their fucking point. So
Yeah.
they're able to strong arm anybody into anything if they own it as a corporation. Whereas the government, at least you have some type of reprieve.
Well, see, what you said is actually the exact opposite of the truth, right? Because when a corporation shuts down the road, they don't have a monopoly on roads, right? So the
They
reprieve
would
is that
they would if they
somebody
owned the
else.
road.
Yeah,
In this
if they
example,
own,
they own the road,
they have a
right?
monopoly on that road, not other roads, right? You're a trucker, you know just as well as anybody, more than anybody else, right? When you look at your GPS or you look at whatever you're looking at, that there are multiple different routes that you can take. And then, of course, the state says you can't go on these roads for whatever reason, but there's usually a scenic route that takes a little bit longer. And then there's the highway. But if there's a bad accident on the highway, you shift the way that you're driving so that you can get to your destination via another way, right?
Yeah, but
But
in
when the
your
state
system,
owns
hold
all the
on, hold
roads,
on.
if the
But in your
state has a monopoly on all of the roads, then the
in your
state can shut down all the roads if they so choose, whereas a corporation can only shut down the roads they own.
and in your example, the corporation would own all roads. So,
Why
like
would
I
one
said,
corporation own all the roads?
why would one corporation own all of the fucking microchips? Why would one
What
corporation get
corporation
so
owns all the
big?
microchips? What are you talking about?
What? Oh, there's only like, okay, so there's three there's three manufacturers of microchips in the world, I think, and they're
I
all
mean,
based
there's
over in
more, but
Southeast Asia, like the big ones. You know what I mean?
yeah, there's the big
Like
ones, right? Like
the ones at the
Intel,
very top. These are the parent.
Huawei, Intel,
The
Huawei, Samsung. Who else?
these are the parent companies, and they have other subsidiaries, right? Or here's a better example,
TSMC.
right?
Thank you.
Here's a better example is a Standard Oil. Standard Oil is the example, right? So let's use that
Okay, yeah, we'll use Standard Oil.
because it's old history. We can look back at it. There's
Yeah,
not as
yeah.
much so Standard Oil is the example. They had to have the government go in and break up that monopoly because he owned all the fucking pipeline. Same
So
thing
did you know
could
that that's
happen.
not true?
How's that not true?
So Standard Oil never had a pure monopoly, right? Like they at their peak, they owned 86% of the oil in America, right? Kerosene specific. Now, before Standard Oil, kerosene was about $25 a barrel, and at the end, it was about $4 a barrel, right? So what they had was known as an efficiency monopoly, which is that they were so fucking good at it that they won out against everybody else because under Standard Oil, oh God, why can I not remember the guy's name? You remember Mark, the guy that
Gandhi, Rockefeller.
Rockefeller.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say one of the other big fucking old cats. And
Carnegie.
fucking
Well, okay.
Carnegie or
So,
something. Right.
so
So-
slow down just for a sec. So the four big or five kingpins from that era: John Rockefeller in oil, Andrew Carnegie in steel,
Yeah.
fucking J.P. Morgan with the banks. Don't forget about fucking Cornelius Vanderbilt with the railroad, and there's one more fucking guy.
Pullman, you could say at some point, but
That's not the name I'm trying to think of.
the guy that bought all the German chemicals and had that, which one was that? Irrelevant.
Yeah.
The big
Anyway,
guys,
it's like
right?
that. Yeah. So those are the four fucking horsemen of the time, right? Because
Right.
Vanderbilt and Rockefeller ended up getting into it because Vanderbilt wanted to move the oil with trains, and then eventually Rockefeller builds a pipeline. So anyway.
Yeah, but regardless, right? He had a monopoly, right? He had a majority of the market share. One of the things that he tried to do was he tried to buy up the competition, right? And that negatively impacted him because when he attempted to buy up the competition, what it did is people started building manufacturing facilities for the express purpose of being bought out at a higher price, right? And that actually like hurt his bottom line, so he stopped doing that. When Standard Oil was being broken apart by the Supreme Court, it was already on the decline. It was never a necessary action, and it actually didn't have any effect on the market to break it apart. So the idea that like this monopoly owned all of this is just a myth. It's not how economics works. It's not how monopolies work. The only way that a monopoly really exists is when is a natural monopoly, an efficiency monopoly, or a state granted monopoly. Now, natural monopoly, right, is when someone is the first to discover a resource, right? So let's say there's some chemical there's something in the ground, some element we're unaware of, right? And it only exists in this one area. Somebody buys the land and like they have all of it in the world, right? This is extremely rare, and it does happen. But what purpose does that item serve? It usually, like if the price is too high, there's still competition to fill the same purpose. An efficiency monopoly, which is what Standard Oil had, was that the reason they gained it is because they were so efficient at production that it was just better. They brought a better product to the consumer, which is to say, he got kerosene down to like less than 20% of the original cost because it was extremely efficient, right? Created new accounting systems, created new manufacturing processes, et cetera, et cetera. It was super valuable.
Of the different monopolies that you just named, though, Rockefeller had all of them because he was on the leading edge of technology when it came to the separation of the oil to even get kerosene, right? That's what led to him being able to refine it as quickly and as well as he did. And then that's also later, instead of having it moved by train, he started building the pipelines to be able to move it, and that further increased the efficiency, which is, again, new technology because it had never been done before. So again, right, all the way around, he had a monopoly, right? Not only because of ownership, but because of the technology that he was able to take advantage of, and he was way ahead in every capacity when it came to it. So he had an all-around monopoly. So when they came to break it apart, it was because of that. So in the example of the roads, we would end up in the exact same place where you'd have to break that up, or the government would have to, take control at some point because the corporation would inevitably create such a problem for the people that they would end up fighting back against it, and then they would turn to the government in order to do that.
You gave a historical example of a company that only benefited the public and was breaking apart on its own and never owned all the roads. It owned a majority of the market share, sure. And it could be the case that a company with not limited by the state could own, let's say, 86% of the roads in America, right? But that doesn't make it impossible to get home, right?
I don't know. If you only have 14% of the roads to travel on in the United States, do you really think your ass is getting down here to Florida? Probably not.
But if a corporation were to own that much of the roads, right? The question is, why do they own that much of the roads, right? And you seem to be like this vision of like the evil capitalist that gets as many of the roads as he can so that he can extort its consumer into incredibly high prices. But if they do that, then what they do is they create a market void because the price is artificially high for the supply-demand equation, which then brings new people into the market. They temporarily lose money, which costs them, right, in the effort to try and maintain this artificially high price of roads, which causes more people to build more roads. Like, there's no financial incentive to do something like that. Like, it's not how that works.
There's hardly ever
has a monopoly.
There's hardly ever a financial incentive for corporations to limit access to anything that they own, right?
Yeah.
And if they're choosing to limit it, right, it's not going to necessarily be because of capital. It's going to be because of power. Because corporations are not just fueled by capital; they're also
but
power.
Like losing capital is losing power if you're a corporation.
Not necessarily. It depends on whether or not the loss of capital in the short term is going to gain you more in the long term. So it's going to depend on what kind of CEO that you got.
Right. But we're talking about the nightmare scenario where the state doesn't exist. So how are they gaining power by losing money?
Well, what if you had, so in this example though, is there any private ownership? I mean, of course there is, because the corporation privately owns the road, right? So
There's only private ownership in this example.
okay,
There is no
so
public ownership.
okay, so then you get to an example where you have a private citizen that ends up owning something that the corporation wants. How do you resolve that?
What do you mean? How do you resolve that? Like,
You have somebody that has, say, 50 acres of land, the corporation wants it, and the guy says, fuck you, I'm not selling.
then it doesn't get sold.
Wrong.
What do you mean
The
wrong?
the corporation still wants it. The corporation has a lot more resources to be able to pull from, so they're going to start doing things to make that person's life difficult until they change their mind. That's what will happen.
Well, if it's aggression, right, then that person presumably is in a covenant community that has rules to deal with this, or they have a rights enforcement agency and they call the police. Like,
whoa, there's no
what do you mean?
police because guess
Yes,
what?
there
There's no
is.
government.
Yes, there is.
There's no government.
What do you mean, dog? You've spoken
Whoa.
with me enough to know that I believe in rights enforcement agencies and private police.
Private police is not government police, where it represents everyone. So then all you have is a corporation acting
Right.
on someone's interest by way of capital. So then the poorest people end up getting left completely out of the system.
The police don't represent everyone now, number one, right? Like that's an insanely silly idea, or we wouldn't have the war on drugs.
But
Right?
I don't
Like,
say
that's
that
just
the
one of
police.
many examples.
Well, one, the police don't represent anyone, right? What they do is enforce law inside given jurisdictions, and
Right,
those laws
they
are
enforce the will of the state.
Well, they enforce the will of the people that put the laws into place.
What?
Yes.
The people. Like, what about the people that don't want certain laws? They don't. That's not the will. That's not the will of the people. It's the will of the majority against the minority. Plus, corporate interests and money that helps people get elected. It's it's complicated, but I mean, but they're not enforcing the will of the people. They're enforcing the will of the majority and business interests against the people that don't want those laws.
Which is the will of the people is the majority. So I don't know why you're making a distinction there.
Because I'm a libertarian, right? I don't think that 51% of people is the will of the people. That's the will of 51% of people against 49.
Okay, so then all the 49% have to do is either A, convince 2% of the population to leave, or import fucking people that think like they do.
Right. They have to fight for their rights against a government that's oppressing their rights. So
no. They have to fight. No. You have to fight for the right to party. Okay. I don't know what fucking decade you grew up in.
I'm a millennial. I'm born 1990. That's my parents listening to fucking.
That's me. I fight for the right to party. Right. I don't know. So I don't know about any of that shit. But the reality at the end of the day is that if you don't, the government having the laws put in place by the people, and then the police enforcing the law inside the given jurisdiction, right, is what creates the cohesiveness of the society. Now, if you have corporations
force
that have
aggression on the minority, is what creates cohesiveness.
Like, have you not seen RoboCop?
It's inherently conflict.
Have you not seen RoboCop?
What about RoboCop? It's been a long time since I've seen RoboCop.
RoboCop is a great example of what happens when corporations come in and take over police precincts. Boom. Watch RoboCop.
Your argument is RoboCop?
Watch RoboCop.
Sure, I'll watch RoboCop again and meme on it.
Not the new one. I'm talking about the old one, bro. Watch the old one, bro. Yeah.
I mean, and
then
like,
think about it. Think about it now with your
you're just
libertarian
referencing
mind.
Hollywood, like, you know what I mean? Like,
look. That's the example, right? I want you to
Dredd Vermin. Great example. You go watch Judge Dredd. There's my argument.
I've seen Judge Dredd. I watched Judge Dredd fucking last year, bro. Right? So.
All right. Well, that's what happens when the state has control of policing, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's silly.
Well,
it's a silly argument.
Yeah, but Judge Dredd is one specific city, right? After this whole fucking apocalyptic event happened, right? So, but RoboCop, right, is more based in reality, what it could be. And I think it'd be interesting for you, especially with your, with the way that you think. Just kind of the private organization comes in, they own the police, and then they start doing all these things, and then you end up seeing what that ends up creating because the police it's no longer protect and serve, even though that's kind of a meme. I think there are still some good cops out there doing great fucking work.
I think there are cops that attempt to do good, but no cop can claim that he's an honorable person, right? To be a police officer is to be
I don't believe
without
that.
honor. Well, I can prove it.
That.
I can unequivocally, objectively prove it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Every police officer, right, just like every soldier and Marine, right, swears a loyalty oath, right, to uphold the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic, right?
Say that one more time.
To uphold and defend the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic, right?
Okay.
Right. Police department practices, by nature, violate the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment, right? Free speech zones, unconstitutional gun laws, massive increases to illegal searches and seizures that were never designed and violate the Constitution, as well as civil asset forfeiture. They're complicit, right? They're complicit and support the active subversion of something that they swore a loyalty oath to protect and defend, whilst they are actively engaging in department policies that attack these very things. So they are an oath breaker. They break their oaths. They do not have honor. You cannot be a police officer and have honor. You can attempt to be a good guy. You can maybe even try to change the system from within, and you can try and do the right thing. And I do have respect for that to a certain degree, right? But by very nature, you're a mercenary agent for the state that violates, that you're being paid to violate the oaths you swore. You're an oath breaker. You lack honor.
And when did that actually start and take place?
When did what actually start and take place?
Because what you're describing is how police are more viewed, say, since the start of the drug war in the 70s versus today. Okay. Because before that, right, you didn't have drug laws.
Are we talking about cops over 55? I'm talking about current cops. Like, I don't want to go to historically, like, maybe 1930s cops had honor. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
You're making a
getting wonky.
You're making a blanket statement about all. So I have to, and then the example from the old can be brought to the new, especially in more rural areas, right? Because they don't have...
If you're talking about the 1970s, right, you're talking about police officers that are over the age of 60 if they're still on the force. And
no, I'm talking more about like the
force,
climate.
It doesn't matter.
No, I'm talking about the climate of the relationship between the populace and the police. That relationship changed when the drug war started.
Okay, for sure.
So because of that,
I think it probably changed in 1967. If we want a good starting point. Pearson v. Ray, right? After the civil rights movement, and people were granted qualified immunity. It's probably the beginning.
Yeah, because after that, they really, really wanted to keep the blacks and the Mexicans down. So that's what they did. They put the war on drugs in place, and here we go.
Yeah. But I would say Pearson v. Ray 1967 is probably the big turning point for like additional corruption in the police and the modern policing system we have today. But that doesn't address the fact that I was just saying, like, cops lack honor, right? We're talking about current cops, right, that are working today, like a cop that you see today. If you want me to be more specific, right? Any police officer working today, right, is working in a police department. Unless there's some secret little pocket, like, sheriff somewhere, which there might be, right? Like somewhere in rural America or Montana or something, right? There's some police department that doesn't enforce any unconstitutional gun laws, doesn't have any free speech zones, doesn't engage in civil asset forfeiture, and, follows a strict constitutional perspective of the Fourth Amendment instead of like the massive expansion of powers that the Supreme Court have given.
Are you familiar with the first county in the United States that declared itself a gun sanctuary, and it wouldn't be enforcing any unconstitutional laws that the federal government wanted enforced?
I don't know which the first county was, but I remember I was at the protests in Richmond when a ton of fucking counties in Virginia did it not too long ago. But the first one, I don't know the first one.
Oh, I do, because it's my home county of Cherokee County, North Carolina.
Okay.
So that's where when I'm talking, I tell you, and I'm trying to, kind of press the point about rural municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
You get into the backwoods, man. There's still a lot of fucking people period. It doesn't matter if they're cops or not, that just don't like the federal fucking government.
Oh, for sure.
And,
Like
and
in
then
Virginia, it's
yeah.
actually pretty intense because we have Nova, right? So like people think Virginia is like a purple, blue leaning state, and that's true, but that's just because of fucking Nova. Northern Virginia is where all the DC politicians, lobbyists, all those people live. If you cut that out of Virginia, we're a fucking libertarian red state. Like even our cities are more like are more right leaning than like a lot of like, you know, coastal like urban centers. Like, and you go out in the mountains of Virginia, you go out coal mining town, like
Whitville, rural retreat. You know.
Yeah, Virginia Beach is pretty blue though. Yeah, Virginia Beach is pretty blue, and Nova, and I mean Richmond is blue, but I mean that's to be expected of any like coastal city, but it's not as blue as like fucking a lot of other places are.
Alexandria.
Oh yeah, that's Nova. Alexandria.
Oh yeah.
Well, at Loudoun County, all that crazy shit that happened that's all that's all Nova. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you know, fucking wonder why this is what happens when and those people didn't have any like it's weird because they were also super isolated from like the financial collapse, right? Like the financial collapse didn't exist in Nova, like after 2009, right?
Right.
Because everyone there was a government employee.
So like, yeah, they all had money.
Yeah, like they never lost jobs, money, or anything like that.
Yeah, they got no problem shitting on the rest of the American people.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's why, like, whenever you go to you keep wanting corporations to control everything. It's just a bad idea, man. You gotta have at least an attempt at a representative government. Without that,
I think a representative government is evil. Well, actually, I won't say it's evil. I will say it's ethically unjustifiable and cannot be evaluated for morality. It just simply it's unjustifiable. So you can't say whether or not it's good or evil because you can't justify the position. It's impossible
doesn't really
to say
matter.
it's justified.
It doesn't really matter whether you think it's good or bad. It's necessary.
I don't believe in necessary evils.
It's not evil.
I think the lesser of two evils is still evil.
It's not evil. You just admitted yourself it's not evil. You wanted to reword it because you understood that the word evil didn't encapsulate it. So let's understand that. And then from there, it's necessary.
Positions are unjustifiable. There you go.
That doesn't mean it so your moral grandstanding about it doesn't matter because it's still necessary. So it doesn't. So because it's necessary, because you have to organize people into bigger structure. I want to say structure, but that's not necessarily the word because but you have to organize the society by way of a government so that you have some type of cohesiveness. Everybody agrees that
I'm not against
you're going to drive on the right side of the road and pass on the left. You know what I mean? So
I'm not against like people voluntarily choosing to be a part of a government, right? What I'm against is the state. And there's a distinction here, right? And libertarians, we get a lot of crap for it. I think just rightly so, because most people use state and government kind of interchangeably, right? And we wouldn't. And so when I say I'm against the state, what I'm really saying is I'm against a system of governance where you do not have private property rights, like in America. Private property rights don't exist because you are forced to engage in taxation. And you're forced into a non-voluntary system. And this usually leads to said government having stolen property, right? Which is the United States government. All public land is stolen land, right? And so I'm not against...
That's not true. That's not true at all. Fucking Louisiana was purchased legally from Spain, so...
No. Spain didn't own it.
Oh, it was France. What was
Spain,
it? No, it was Spain. It was Spain. It was Spain that owned it. No,
the Louisiana
it was France.
Purchase was France, but
it was France because he bought from Napoleon. That's right. So
yeah, but France didn't own it.
It was
they
purchased.
Just conquered a portion and said we own this now.
Okay, well they had the deed and we bought the deed. So
yeah, but like that's like me saying I went to your home, right, and robbed you at gunpoint, and for whatever reason your accuracy was off that day, and you didn't pop me in the fucking chest like I know you would, right? And I stole your property, and I said, this is mine now, right? And you're like, and then I sell it to someone, you'd be like, well, that's not stolen because, he bought it. Like, no, right? It's yours.
Well, then, okay, so then I guess you'd probably be of the mindset that there's no ownership at all then, because
No.
even the people that came across Bering Strait and ended up settling the American continents, they had to come in and do the exact same thing. So there's no ownership if you're going to be philosophically consistent.
No.
Or
I am philosophically consistent.
Okay.
Well, you're ascribing to me a position I don't hold, and saying
I'm pointing out the eventuality, right? Because everything is either there's some type of agreement between people that there is ownership, or there is no agreement and everything is just free use.
I'll explain to you. Right. So have you read? This will be quicker if you've read John Locke's Second Treatise on Government.
No.
Okay. Great book, right? It is one of the inspirational documents for the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, right?
Okay.
It's where Thomas Jefferson got life, liberty, and property from, changed property to the pursuit of happiness, and his original draft had property in it, which was a direct quote from this text, but he didn't want to justify slavery, and so he changed property to the pursuit of happiness, right?
Like that.
He thought if he put slavery, if he put property in it, that the foundational documents would be used to maintain the institution of slavery. So they changed it to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But life, liberty, and property comes from this, right? And so, unfortunately, you haven't read it. So, homesteading principle, right? It's also known as like the Lockean proviso, is kind of the basis libertarian. We differ a little bit. But my question is, do you have the right of self-autonomy? Do you believe that you have the right to do with your body what you want to do with your body, and no one can tell you that I have a right to your body, or that I can tell you what to do with your body? You there? Or are you just thinking about it? I could hear the spit dribble. Oh, man. All right, CTV. We can't hear you, brother. I'm too sexy for my
Can you hear me
hat.
now? Is it
Yeah, I
working
can
now?
hear you now. Yeah.
It's so weird.
It happens sometimes.
I got this Logitech 835 headset now, and this microphone. When I flipped it up so you wouldn't hear my vape, actually, were you hearing my vape at all?
No, I didn't hear anything. Like, everything disappeared.
No. I mean, like, throughout the conversation, have you heard my vape?
I haven't heard your vape, but I think your vape has triggered the sound for me to hear just background noise sometimes, but it's fine.
Okay. So I'm still learning this headset. So when I flipped it up, trying to prevent it changed inputs. Anyway, Say what you said again.
So do you believe that you have a right to self-autonomy, which is to say that you have a right to use your body untrammeled by anyone else demanding your body?
Yeah, I think that if people can make their own decisions to include ending their own life, it is theirs.
Okay. So that makes the justification for libertarian philosophy super easy, right? Because now we don't have to justify that right. You believe it already. We can move forward from there, right? So because you believe that, right? Where we believe that the justification for private property comes from, right? Is that when you mix your labor with a commodity or a natural resource, this is known as homesteading, right? So you live out in the woods and you go down and you cut some trees and you turn it into firewood. And then you take your labor and you dry the firewood, right? And you cover it with a tarp. So now you have like good dry firewood. I can't come and say, give me your firewood, right? Because you have a right to that firewood. And the reason you have a right to that firewood is that I cannot unmix your labor, of which you have a right to, from that firewood. In order to say you owe me your firewood, right, would be a violation of private property rights. But what it's really boiling down to is that I can't give you back the labor that you already spent. I can't give you back the right to your body. So if I take your firewood, I'm in effect saying that I own your body, or I own some of your labor and what you do with your body. Does that make sense?
Well, doesn't the corporations do the exact same thing when they're paying you an hourly wage?
No, because you're voluntarily doing that. You're saying, "Hey, I'm willing to work for you for this amount of money." Right?
Okay.
They're not demanding that you just give them your labor. They're saying, "I'll pay you this if you come work for me." And you go,
Right.
"Okay, I'll come work for you."
Okay, so what's the example where we're talking about theft then?
Right. So you said that I don't believe in private property at all, right?
I know, what I said is the eventuality is either because you said that the United States had stolen all of its land when it purchased Louisiana from France, right? So you said no,
Okay,
but then we have to
I'll
go.
connect that. I'll connect.
Yeah, we have
that.
to go all the way back to when the first indigenous peoples came across the Bering Strait and then settled the Americas. They would have essentially done the same thing, which is conquered the land.
So what is important here is the land homesteaded? It's not about whether or not you live on the land, right? It's about whether or not you mix your labor and change the land, right? So if a Native American tribe builds, let's say, a monolithic structure, that's private property.
Is the word. Yeah, terraform's the word you're looking for.
No, I'm using the word homesteading intentionally because it's from the Lockean Provisio. It's foundational Enlightenment documents that.
Yeah, but you're talking about changing the landscape, though, not necessarily just building a structure, right?
Well, terraforming would be just like terraforming may not be permanent, right? Like, so if I build farm and then I abandon the farm and the farm's gone, right? Like, I don't really own that land anymore.
I just got there having that same discussion with the post office because they were arguing a permanent structure, and I was like, okay, well, so define permanent.
It's a stronger land claim. If I build a house on it, I definitely own that house, right? And the reason I own that house is because I can't take that house from you or say that it's mine because there's an inability for me to separate your labor that you went into to build this structure from the thing itself, right? But what I can do is I can say, I'll give you $150,000 for that house, right? And then you can say, yeah, I'll do that, right? Now you've given up voluntarily what it is that belongs to you in exchange for something that you wanted. Or you could just give it away for free if you so choose, right? If that's what you want, like donate the house to the homeless, doesn't matter. Like, you have to voluntarily give it up. If I demand it from you, right, I'm stealing your labor. Yeah, this is why taxation is theft.
In the example, though, right? Because because I'm still going to be arguing this from your no government versus corporation rule, right? So, both are going to end up like if the land is owned by the government or if it's owned by a corporation, ultimate power is still going to be with ownership. So in the example that we had where you had the guy that had 50 acres, the corporation wanted it, at least if it was the government, they would be reprieved, not, for the guy with 50 acres to be able to get his voice loud enough to those around him to see about getting support and then actually getting the government in check. Whereas the corporation, they don't really care. They're going to keep doing what they're doing to do. So,
but you could say the same about the corporation.
I just did about the corporation. The government itself, at least, you don't have any reprieve with the corporation. Only if they allow it. At least in government. That's
the same with the government.
No, it's not. Because
have you never heard of eminent domain? Like people.
Yes, I have.
Fight to keep their land, and the government says, no, we want your land, so we're going to pay you this amount of money that we deem your land is worth, and we're going to steal the land from you. And we'll compensate you for the theft.
Yeah, but those happen on the rarest of occasions. If a corporation had that ability, it would happen a hell of a lot more.
But the corporation doesn't have the ability to just steal your land.
Not right now, but in your system it would.
Why? Why would my system have, like, what are you talking about?
Because as soon as because in your example, capital is power, right? So corporation is able to continue gaining more capital because it already has capital, because we're still operating under capitalism, right? So once it has capital, it can continue to build capital at an exponential rate. So because of that, it's going to end up owning fucking everything. This principle goes back to exactly what Thomas Jefferson said on the floor of the Senate when it came to central banks, right? And the evil, why you got to watch out for corporations, because they'll end up fucking owning everything and leave the American people stranded.
But that's not how economics works, right? Like the
it
assumption
doesn't really matter
here,
how economics works. It's how human greed works. And you give it the power of a corporation behind it, and then you're there.
Right, but you're not substantiating the claim. You're just making the claim. You see what I'm saying? Like you're just saying, without the state, corporations will just inevitably grow, which like is a bold claim, right? First and foremost. Second, you're saying
it's either they grow or they decline, right?
Right.
It's either they grow or they decline. There's no middle ground for corporations. So they're either growing or declining, right?
Well, I mean, corporations can be stagnant for a period of time, but again, the other thing is that at some point in time, right, in order to do what it is that you're saying that they have to do, they have to use aggression, right? They have to steal someone's land. They have to force them off of their land violently, right?
It doesn't have to be violent. It doesn't have to be violent at all. They can, as a matter of fact, if the corporation has all the power to be able to make the laws, they could just make it so difficult legislatively.
They're not making laws. What are you talking about?
Then who's actually? So is there any law at all in your system?
Voluntary and natural law.
Wow. So there's no courts?
Nobody said there's no courts. Courts are voluntary.
So there's no courts.
No. Nobody said that.
Motherfucker, if I didn't have to go to this fucking jury summons on the 30th, my ass wouldn't fucking go, okay?
Right. So
in your system, nobody's fucking working together.
That's not true. Like you're not, that's not true, right? So let's say you would probably live in a covenant community, right? So like you would live under a system of governance. It might even have democracy in it. And you would probably sign up for a monopoly on courts and anything anyway. So like under my philosophy, the only difference between what you want and what you would experience is that you'd have to sign a contract to live in that community. So like what you desire, right, which is a monopoly on courts and a monopolistic police force, and monopolistic court system, right? Like you can have all of that under anarcho-capitalist or libertarian philosophy. What you have to do, however, is you can't steal people's land and steal people's money and say, well, we have a majority vote plus, all the corporate influences and, we represent you, but we also represent the corporations. So like, so we kind of just do what we want to do, but we don't go too far out of bounds or the other opponent might win. Right? Instead of all of that, you just sign a contract that says like, I live in this neighborhood or this small city or maybe even this small state, right? And I say state like 50 nifty United States, not state as
okay. So
state.
Say I don't want to sign the contract.
Then you don't get to move there.
Oh. So every community's like this. They're going to force you into a contract. I don't want to sign the contract.
Nobody's forcing you. It would be aggression to force you.
Where do I go?
Go live in the fucking woods somewhere. I don't fucking know.
Oh. I see. So there's no private ownership of property and me to be able to tell everybody to get the fuck off of my property.
No, nobody said that.
You're saying that I have to sign a contract. If I have to sign a contract, there's going to be certain allowances for people to be able to have access or X, Y, and Z. I just want everybody to fuck off.
If that's what you want to do, then go buy some land.
No, I want to do it. I want to buy my land right in the middle of the fucking town and tell you to fuck off. And I've got the capital to do it.
If that town is a covenant community, right, they'll tell you, sign this contract and agree to these rules, right? Or fuck off. We're not selling you this land.
Okay, so now I have the power to be able to surround your community and cut off all access by road.
No, that's an act of aggression.
How's that an act of aggression? I own it.
Okay, because what you don't own, so there's a really interesting document by Hans Hermann Hoppe called Common, Public, and Private Property and the Rationalization for the Total Privatization of Property, right? So what you're talking about, right, is that you have a group of people that at one point in time existed without you, right? Which is to say they had used property that was owned by somebody else and they had egress, right? Just like egress cases when you're talking about, like, an electrician, for example, has egress to go into your property to like fix a power, like an electric pole, right? Like even though you own your property, like they can still go on to that because you've kind of agreed to that with the power company, etc. Right? Now these people
Yeah,
have
but in
egress
this
rights to leave or to come
yeah,
in.
but in this example, right? Because I'm
Hmm.
going to be the corporation in this example. I own all the
Hmm.
roads coming in and out of this community. I want to buy that house right in the middle of it and
Hmm.
tell all of y'all to fuck off. You
Hmm.
tell me, okay, we're not going to sell it to you. It's to fuck off. So I cut off all access on the roads. What are you going to
Right.
do?
You're an aggressor now. So what we're gonna do is, depending on the power of the company or the
Uh
power of the
huh.
town, likely they have a rights enforcement agency or private military. They may contract other people, get a loan, whatever is required, right? You've now engaged in an act of aggression, so you're stopped from
Mm.
being able to, until you are willing to pay restitution, you're stopped from us being able to, not just stealing your property or fighting you, right?
I'm just
You
not
committed an
allowing you
act of
access
war.
to my. I'm just not allowing you access to my property. Underneath your philosophy, you have to respect it.
No, I don't, because you aggressed upon me. You kidnapped me.
Not really. I just prevent you from
But
using
really,
my shit.
right? No, it's not a prevention. What I just said is that these
And,
people
and,
have
that, and as
egress
a matter
rights.
and as a matter of fact, your egress rights go out the fucking door as soon as I hire a private military myself to just patrol the road and prevent access.
Right. So
What are you
what you
gonna
now
do?
said is the corporation became a warlord, right? And the
Hmm.
warlord is attempting to take over this town and presumably fight a war and potentially, based upon the interests of other people, fight everybody, right?
I
So I don't know
all
where
I'm
this
doing.
corporation's getting their money from, because now they're warlords, right? And companies are going to stop giving them access. Insurance companies aren't going to cover them. And very potentially the private company that you want to hire for security may tell them to fuck off, or they may choose to be a part of the warlords campaign, right? They've committed an act of war. They're not financially
Uh,
incentivized to do this under most
you
circumstances.
haven't proved any part of this because I own the road.
What?
I owned the road.
That you're just saying words now.
No, no, I own the road in this example. So since I
Right.
own the road, I can do what I want with my road, and I'm putting private military just to patrol it on it.
Okay, but you
They're not.
didn't say
They're
I
not. They're
own
not.
the
They're not
road. What
going
you said
anywhere.
is I own all the property around this, and I'm
Yeah.
refusing to allow anyone to leave, thus I'm kidnapping them. It's very different than owning one road and being like, I don't fucking like you guys,
No,
and
no,
then
no,
people just
no,
build
no.
a
What I
different
said
road.
is I own all the property around it, and I'm not
Right.
allowing any access on the roads. If you want to walk out, fucking feel free.
Okay, so people are allowed to leave, but they're not allowed to leave via certain forms of transportation.
I mean, I own it.
If you're not allowing people to come and go freely, right, and you encapsulate them, right, and then you start trying to force them into like poverty, and you like restrict access to goods coming in, right? Like at a certain point, you're kidnapping them.
There you go. Rickety Rocket's got a good idea. You got to sign a contract to leave.
That's okay. What does the contract entail? It's a
What, giving
contract
up
is
your
under
first,
duress. It's not a valid contract.
giving
But
up
if
your
I'm coercing
firstborn.
you
Hell, yeah. There you go.
if
You're got to.
if
If you want to leave this little
it's
fucking
not a
town that
valid
I own all the land around it and all the roads, you need to give up your firstborn. There
it's
you
not
go.
a valid contract if I put a gun to your head and say sign this
There's
contract
no.
or else.
There's no gun to your head. You feel free to go
You
inside
just
this
said there was
patch.
a gun to my head. You said that there are
No,
private military policing it that won't let me leave, or they're threatening to kill me. They're
no,
they're they're they're
we're not
getting rid of my
allowing.
egress rights.
We're not allowing you to walk onto our private property. It's that simple. I'm defending my land.
Right. You're just restating the claim and not engaging with the argument that I'm giving. You're
That's
running away
because
from it.
no, you're refusing to understand the reality that if I own something, then I can defend it under your
Yes,
system.
that's no. I just said you're not. I don't know if you're not listening, if you're not getting it, or if you're just trolling me. Right? I'm
No,
saying you have egress rights.
you're saying that there are egress rights, but you don't
Hmm.
have egress rights against other people's property without them agreeing to it,
You
right?
have egress right. You said that they have egress rights because they homesteaded those egress rights, which is this. So let me give you an example. Right? I live in a village, right? And this village has a nearby river where everyone's getting water. everybody uses this path, this game trail, right? Through the woods, a short distance to go get water from the nearby river, right? It's clean water. It's very rarely tainted, right? Etc. Now, I come in as the big corporation capitalist, right? And I say, look, sometimes people get sick from this water, right? And I want to sell you guys better water, right? I want to install a water filtration system, right? Because that'll be better. And people are like, hell yeah, that'll be awesome, right? But some people don't want to buy the water because they had free access to water. In order for that corporation needs to maintain egress rights because it was common property. Before that corporation showed up, people were able to freely move to and fro, right? And were able to go get water. So if you either have to maintain a trail or you have to have some form of agreement with me as someone that lived in that village. Now, if I move to the village, I don't have any egress rights, right? Because I never previously, homesteaded any like game trail to and from the water, right? Like I didn't have this access to water before, so it doesn't matter, right? But to the people currently living in the village, you either need to compensate them where they voluntarily choose to allow you to do that, or you need to give them access to the water in some capacity.
No, I don't.
Okay, if you're just gonna be an aggressor and like play it like a fucking Call of Duty game, right? Then like eventually you're gonna get killed, right? Like,
well, that right there is kind of the risk that you take, right? So in your system where the corporation has the ability, now that you're understanding that the ability to do what I'm saying is possible, right? Then how do you fight back against that? You don't have a government that can, take you to court and hold you responsible, this, and that, and the other in your system. And that's why ultimately it ends up being more like Mad Max or some shit than it does about having any type of cohesive society.
You're just making claims. You're just saying these things don't exist, except they do.
How do they exist?
Okay, so the village has a rights enforcement agency. They have a different fucking company that protects their rights, just like insurance or car insurance, right? That deals with these situations.
But in this situation, it doesn't really matter if the area of land that we're talking about is like, say, a small town, a village, or if it's a city, or if it's an entire county. A corporation would have the ability to buy all of the land all the way around it and then prevent access to that property.
What you're talking about, right, is let me back up on this. What you're saying, right, is that because violent aggressors can exist, your system is incoherent, right? And so what you're saying, the Ukrainian war shouldn't be occurring if what you're saying is true of nation states, right? Like, we recognize that Russia invaded Ukraine, right, and is willing to kill people. Yeah, there are people with more power. There are organizations with more power. I'm not selling you a utopian world like all the problems magically go away if we abolish the state. I'm not a fucking communist, right? I don't think once we get rid of the private property, everything will be happy. I'm not saying that. Conflict is a fact of humanity, right? But what you're attempting to do is saying because that conflict exists, we need to steal somewhere between 33% to 55% of all of the wealth in a nation to set up this monopolistic government and that we have today. And I'm saying, no, we don't. We can have voluntary systems.
Okay, so I'm glad that you understand how the structure of government was put in place to begin with before the passing of the Federal Reserve Banking Act. And then now you must address how that evil and it's coming to fruition and bringing all of the capital from the future into the present by way of debt, like we were talking about earlier, allows for this system to be able to exist that we have today. The original system.
How does the state allow? What do you mean?
Well, the crony capitalism is kind of the layman's term, but that's right. Essentially it, because you're allowed to take on so much fucking debt in the present. It allows for the exponential use of the money again in those ways that have that happen. So
what's your
question? The system, well, it's not a question. The system that we're in with the representative government at least allows the poorest American to be able to have some voice, whereas in your system where it's corporations only, you have to have some type of capital in order to even have any voice. And that is where it breaks down, because now not everybody's being represented.
this is an unfounded claim. Like, first of all, you're just using the word corporation, right? When we're talking about private owners. Second of all, corporations would likely be less common and also wouldn't have the same power that they have under this current system, right? They would have less power than they currently have. And since I'm accusing you of pushing systems, making arguments without backing them up, I can back this up quite easily, right? In that regulatory capture exists. I think we both recognize that. Corporations are, with large amounts of power, are able to gain monopolies through government and state enforced contracts, which allow them to gain more power. They have afforded special protections over others. Right? I think we see this all the time with Section 230 and and being improperly used to protect big tech, for example. There's also the idea of whether or not more polycentric systems would likely create some form of economic barriers to more global corporate powers than we currently have. There's also the fact that when you understand how much money is stolen via taxation, right, this actually pushes out small businesses out of the market, and regulation pushes small businesses out of the market, whereas state regulation is less effective relative to large corporations that are able to absorb that cost because they have so much capital. So you have a more free market and more competition and likely less large corporations.
Yeah, everything you just said is true, right? And conservatives understand the argument well, right? The difference is that in the system where you have a representative government, you at least have a voice. In a system where you don't have any government at all, and it's all private ownership and corporations, and I think you're assuming that corporations would somehow be holding themselves back, but that's just to make a very, very false assumption about human behavior, right? If
Why would I
human
assume
beings are,
corporations are holding themselves back? I don't understand that.
well, you said they wouldn't be getting as big, but I think that they would be getting just as big, if not even bigger than they are.
No, I just explained multiple ways why the state makes it to where corporations are more likely to get large because of the way that regulation works and things like that. Whereas in a system where you don't have massive taxes, you don't have massive forced upon regulation, you don't have special government protections, you don't have bailouts, things like that, corporations will engage in more low time preference behavior and they'll be in a more competitive market.
Not if they own the fucking road.
Oh my God. You're literally just going back to the roads. I've already soundly defeated this absurd proposition.
There's no way that you have, because if the corporation owns the road, then they can limit access, and there's no reprieve for the poorest American.
The state That's the problem. Owns all of the roads, right?
Mm-hmm. And at least there's some reprieve.
Has an extortion racket to pay for these roads. You yourself admitted that the state is taking massive amounts of taxes, and we have shit roads, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a free market system, no one would own all of the roads. It would be nigh impossible to do so. They would be in a competitive market, and they would be incentivized to compete to provide the best roads possible for the cheapest price.
Yeah, but it doesn't work out that way. And that's why you advocate for zero government, and I advocate for the barest minimum of government. Because I think you're absolutely crazy in thinking that the poorest Americans are going to be represented in a system that is completely based on capital. So it's just not going to work.
I grow weary of the conversation where I make claims and explain them, and then you say, yeah, but humans don't work that way, and then you don't back it up.
They don't.
I want to know before I get to this reaction video from Steven Crowder today, because I don't want it to get too late. I want to know how you've been, like in your personal life. How's life going, man? I know you said something about business. You can share what you want to share. You don't have to share everything, but I'm more interested in the man, the myth, the legend CTV than like us getting down a libertarian versus conservative, rabbit hole.
Well, the desktop has changed. We no longer have the cube.
Oh no! But were you able to resurrect like most of the components?
Well,
without spending too much money.
The cube is gone, and now we have a white Fantex Evolve X with the ATX board and the RTX 3070 and everything, and the Noctua air cooler, and nice. we added an ITX board and a 13th gen i7 with DDR5. So we're getting ready for basically, well, let's just say that the debate world isn't ready.
Is there a wink and a nudge in that statement?
Could be. I
There
mean,
could be a wink and a
what
nudge
is
in that statement.
what is Twitch without the hippy dippy champion, right?
I mean, you know, I never got my shot. I got that bullshit fucking hippy dippy duo thing where I was robbed. I never got my shot at the king.
Yeah, because like we're 2023 is approaching. I would say probably about July, August time frame. That's when shit's gonna really kind of kick up, and then we're gonna have a whole year of being able to kind of recapture what we did before. And if we're smart about it, all of us are going to end up that are involved in the space at all are going to end up being able to say capitalize on the opportunity, because the 2024 election, buddy, it's gonna be good.
I mean, it's gonna be it'll be interesting. I don't know if the conservatives can ever win another election again if they don't get their shit together.
I don't necessarily think it has a damn thing to do with that right now. I think that January 6th did a really, really good job of highlighting to these fucking elites that there's a large portion of the American population that is not happy with globalization, and that they better start doing things to start bringing shit back home, because that's what Trump was doing.
I don't know, man. I think January 6th proved that they need to fortify more elections. Wink, wink. I think it also. I mean, when I look at these midterms, everyone's like, "Well, this just shows that like abortion was a big issue," and it's like, yeah, that played a role, right? It was stupid for Republicans to really lean in on abortion right before the midterms, like from a tactical perspective, right? I mean, it was just a great way to galvanize, young Democrats to get out to vote. But I mean, the Republican Party ran two fucking Republicans against each other in Alaska. They spent millions trying to primary fucking MAGA and America First
Arizona
candidates, right? They spent millions trying to defeat, Blake Masters, who's the only fucking Republican I was supporting, right? I really wanted Blake Masters to win. That was the only one I really gave a fuck about, right? Like, and Kerry Lake. So I don't know. And then we see this, this House rep, Speaker of the House thing. It looks like the old guard is really trying to maintain and solidify their power, and we'll see what that internal fighting means in the Arizona, not Alaska. No. In Alaska, they ran two Republicans against each other. Like Masters was in Arizona, though.
Yeah, they tried to primary him. I thought that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, well, they did both. All right, CTV, you got a lot of white static.
Static.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's great. That's great. But you've been doing well. You talking about possibly coming back, huh? Oh, that looks beautiful. I fucking love the white accents there.
Mm-hmm.
And the Noctua air filter is so many people are so obsessed with water cooling, but I mean, I'm gonna tell you, man, those big ass air filters work great.
Well, it's not a filter; it's a heat sink.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I said air filter, but you know what I meant.
Yeah, but there is a water cooler too. I had to put the water cooler on the ITX board at the top. You see it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to keep the air.
We have some questions, some questionable cable management here, but I mean, overall, it looks good.
Yeah, I took that picture in. I haven't taken a picture of it all set up because I still have to go through and route and do all of the RGB right now. I've got it all set up and working, but the RGB isn't done yet, so I still got to do that. But that's a look. That's a preview for what's coming down the pipe.
All right, man. Well, is there anything you wanted to say to people before you may or may not make a triumphant return to the Twitch politics community? So, insofar as my audience.
Well, I'll say this. The idea of, I think going back to the whole screaming and, drunk and everything, I think that had its time. But I think moving forward, the calm, rational CTV that has conversations like I've been having here with Fabian is what you can expect. So
I miss that one, man. It's like when you'd get like shit face on a debate panel, it would fucking trigger the fuck out of me, man. It was just annoying to deal with. But I always loved like those late night hopping on CTV panel and he's just playing some Halo and fucking having a good conversation. I do miss that.
yeah. Well, it's I've got some of the plans that I've got moving forward are building essentially like die-cast car racing, like Mario Kart. So I'm gonna start doing that, and the world that I'm going to build around it is going to be all in Lego.
All right, yeah.
So I've already got like the Lion's Castle and the medieval blacksmith and a lot of those Lego sets, right? So I'm gonna build all that shit up. I'm gonna stream me doing it, and then I'm gonna also do the diecast car racing and hold series races and do that while I'm streaming too, and then take the recorded content and go make YouTube videos and you just do fun stuff,
Yeah,
And then
I think the politics can get a little rough from the fun. Get a little separated from the fun sometimes.
Yeah, so the politics is going to come back around, but it's going to be like whenever I go to do politics, I'm not going to be streaming. I'm going to focus on doing my diecast car racing and stuff like that. And when I go to politics, it'll be just me being on their stuff. So,
all right, brother.
Plus,
well, I hope to see you around more, and let me know when that content is. You always got a space in my Discord, at least when you launch that YouTube channel for doing stuff like that. Definitely let me know. I gave you content creator role in Discord, so you can like spam to it to get some initial subs for sure.
Appreciate that, Scott.
All right, brother.
All right.
I'm gonna watch Steven Crowder's big thing because I've yet to see it.
Yeah,
I only
man.
saw the first 2 minutes.
All right, we'll talk to you later, brother.
All right, brother. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.